It was supposed to be just another day at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Rows of delegates, stiff suits, routine speeches. But when Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso took the podium, no one in that grand hall of 193 nations expected the next 18 minutes to shake the foundations of global diplomacy. Traoré began speaking calmly in French. His message? A call for unity, peace, and cooperation among nations, especially with Africa. His words were thoughtful, firm, and clear, but what the world heard wasn't what he said. Unbeknownst to Traoré or anyone else in that moment, something deeply disturbing was happening behind the scenes. The official English interpreter, a woman named Elena Michaels, wasn't just translating. She was distorting, twisting phrases like peaceful collaboration into a declaration of struggle against Western powers. For 12 whole minutes, the room absorbed a version of Traoré's message that was never his. Words of friendship and diplomacy were being turned into threats. But then, in a twist that could have come straight from a political thriller, Traoré quietly activated a hidden earpiece, one that let him hear the English translation. And everything changed. Mid-sentence, Traoré paused. The room fell into a dense silence. Over 3,000 people stopped breathing for a second. He looked up, calm but visibly shaken, and said into the microphone, "There's a problem with the English translation. I say peace. She translates war." The entire assembly heard it. Every word echoed across the chamber and across the globe. Live broadcasts from CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera caught in real time. A storm had begun, live on air. You could feel the shift. Eyes darted to the glass-walled translation booths. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres looked stunned. Panic spread in the interpreter's corner. Elena Michaels tried to mute her mic, tried to leave. But Traoré had already requested security to lock down the booths. No one leaves. The head of UN security ordered, "This incident must be investigated." Traoré didn't move from the podium. He raised his voice, steady and unshaken. "Honorable delegates, I'm speaking in French. Those of you who understand it, compare what I say with the English being broadcast. The truth has been manipulated." A flurry of headphones went on. Diplomats scrambled to compare. Within seconds, the Canadian foreign minister activated his microphone. "Mr. President, there are serious discrepancies. What we heard in English is not what the president of Burkina Faso said in French." One by one, other officials spoke up. Switzerland confirmed it. Then Belgium. Then Senegal. The room was unraveling. And then came one of the most unforgettable images. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, caught on camera, eyes wide with disbelief. Back in the translation booth, Elena tried once more to leave, but it was too late. Security had locked the doors. The microphones in all translation booths were shut off. Meanwhile, global news outlets erupted with breaking news banners. Translation sabotage at UN. President exposes mistranslation live. Diplomatic bombshell. UN in crisis. UN Secretary General Guterres turned his mic on. "This is unprecedented. We are suspending this session for 30 minutes. An investigation will begin immediately." But Traoré didn't step down. He stood tall, defiant, and deeply disappointed. "I came here to speak for peace, to offer cooperation. But someone tried to use this moment to rewrite my words, to frame a message of hope as a threat. This cannot be ignored. In nearly 8 decades of United Nations history, no moment like this had ever unfolded. This wasn't just a diplomatic mishap. It was an attack on truth, on trust. And it happened in front of the whole world. Sometimes, history doesn't arrive with tanks or treaties. Sometimes, it happens in a single sentence, spoken boldly by a man who refused to let his voice be stolen. And on that day, the truth was louder than the lie. Still standing firm behind the podium, Captain Traoré raised his voice once more. "I will not step down. Not until this investigation is done." Right here, in front of everyone. That demand sent ripples through the chamber. It was a direct challenge to the UN standard protocol. But at that moment, no one had the moral ground to oppose him. Not even UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. After a brief and tense silence, Guterres gave in. With the approval of this assembly, The investigation will proceed openly. The room erupted, not in chaos this time, but in a heavy, shared awareness that something far more serious than a mistranslation had just been uncovered. Behind the scenes, the UN's internal audit team scrambled into action. Their first target, Elena Michaels, the longtime French-English interpreter who had twisted Traoré's speech. At first glance, her record seemed spotless. 15 years of clean service. No public complaints. No red flags. But as investigators dug deeper into her translations over the past 6 months, something troubling surfaced. A pattern. Subtle. Consistent manipulation, nearly all during speeches delivered by African leaders. Sarah Mitchell, head of the UN's Internal Oversight Division, addressed the media. We're finding clear signs of intentional distortion. This may have been happening for months, and not just with Captain Traoré. From the podium, Traoré struck a deeper chord. This is not just about me. How many African voices have been twisted? How many leaders misunderstood? How many decisions shaped by mistranslations instead of truth? The room shifted again, this time with an air of reckoning. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa stood to speak. I remember having issues with my translations too. Something felt off. Now I understand why. Delegates from Kenya, Ghana, Senegal, and several others echoed similar concerns. A wave of realization swept across the room. For months, Africa may have been misrepresented on the world stage. Not through conflict, but through carefully polished lies. That night, under mounting pressure, the UN took an unprecedented step. Every African leader's speech translation from the past 6 months would be reviewed, publicly, line by line. Cameras swarmed as Elena Michaels was escorted from her translation booth by UN security. Outside, reporters shouted her name, demanding to know who she had been working for. Early findings revealed unsettling links. Michaels had recent contact with several foreign lobbying networks. Her emails hinted at translation tone management and soft censorship, but the full story was still under wraps. Speaking to the press, Traoré gave a powerful statement. This is not a translation error. It's disinformation. It's deliberate, and it has shaped how the world sees Africa. That line hit headlines worldwide. Africa's voice twisted, read The Guardian. Interpreter crisis. Who's behind the lies? Asked The Washington Post. CNN simply headlined, sabotage at the podium. French President Emmanuel Macron called the incident deeply troubling. Britain's Prime Minister said, transparency is essential. But the most forceful response came from the United States. This undermines the credibility of the United Nations, said the White House press secretary. We expect a full investigation, nothing less. The next morning, Elena Michaels was brought in for formal questioning. Under pressure, she admitted the truth. Yes, she said, I altered the language. I was told to make the African leader's tone more diplomatic, less confrontational. When asked who gave her those instructions, her response was vague and evasive. There were pressures from diplomatic circles. I can't name anyone. That non-answer only fueled speculation. Who were these unnamed diplomatic circles? Was this a lone actor or something bigger? At a follow-up press conference, Traoré didn't hold back. This is not just an interpreter problem. It's part of a broader system designed to silence, soften, or distort Africa's voice. We will not stay quiet about this. And he wasn't alone. That same day, the UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, weighed in. Tamper with translation is a violation of free expression. It is not only a breach of trust, it may be a breach of international law. By the third day, more interpreters came forward. Russian translator Ivan Petrov said bluntly, there's been pressure lately, subtle but real. Some people wanted us to adjust messages from certain countries. Chinese interpreter Li Wei made a similar confession. I was told to clean up strong language from speeches, especially from African nations. The floodgates had opened. What began as one man catching a mistranslation turned into a global reckoning. By the fourth day, it was no longer just about Captain Ibrahim Traoré, or even Africa. The cracks ran far deeper. Interpreter after interpreter admitted the same thing. They were advised to soften the words of leaders from developing countries, to strip urgency, water down demands, and remove any hint of confrontation. The problem was systemic. The fallout was swift. Standing before the General Assembly once again, Traoré didn't ask for an apology. He demanded structural change. As Burkina Faso, we call for a full reform of the UN's translation system. No more shadows. No more gatekeepers between truth and the world. He proposed bold, unprecedented measures. Each country should be allowed to bring its own interpreter. All translations must be recorded and made publicly available. Transparency must replace trust. At first, some delegates hesitated, but then the floodgates opened. The Brazilian representative stood up. We too have faced strange inconsistencies. Spanish to English translations, misaligned, misrepresented. This is bigger than one region. The Indian delegate followed, echoing the same concerns. What was once an African issue had now become a global awakening. The fifth day brought even more shocking revelations. The UN's internal security report showed that Elena Michaels had financial ties to several lobbying firms with a known interest in shaping international perception. These firms were quietly pushing narratives, not with press releases, but through earpieces and headsets. That same day, the New York District Attorney announced an investigation. By day 6, Michaels had been formally detained. The charges? Abuse of position, manipulation of diplomatic information, and violation of international ethical codes. Outside the courthouse, Traoré released a short but powerful statement. Justice has been served, for now. But justice without reform is a bandage on a broken bone. The system must change. And it did. Under immense global pressure, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres formed a Translation Reform Commission, including representatives from every continent. And yes, Traoré was on it. Africa deserves to be heard, not rephrased, he said. We are here to make sure our voices are no longer filtered through someone else's fear or agenda. By the second week, the media had picked up the deeper story. It wasn't just about translation anymore. It was about voice control and the manipulation of narratives on a global scale. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all launched urgent reviews of how translated captions and algorithms might skew messaging. Google Translate publicly committed to reevaluating its AI model for cultural and political bias. Technology firms around the world announced plans to create new global standards for translation accuracy and transparency. By the third week, history was made. In an extraordinary vote at the UN General Assembly, the translation reform package passed with overwhelming support. White heavy checkmark 156 countries voted in. Favor crossmark 15 opposed balance scale. 22 abstained. The new reforms included mandatory recording of original speeches alongside translations, independent interpreters signing declarations of neutrality, regular audits of translation quality, a rapid complaint response system for misrepresentation. In his final speech after vote, Captain Traoré didn't celebrate. He reflected. This isn't just the reform of a translation booth. It's the opening of a door where no nation's voice can be changed behind glass. This is the democratization of diplomacy. And the world listened. Investigations into the lobbying firms that backed Michaels revealed extensive disinformation networks, targeting not just Africa, but South America, Southeast Asia, and beyond. These companies weren't simply influencing policy. They were editing history in real time. The European Parliament took up the case, calling it an urgent warning for all democracies. NATO Secretary General issued a rare statement, saying, "When words are manipulated, peace itself becomes unstable. Trust must be restored in institutions, in dialogue, in each other." Epilogue. The day the translation stopped, it took just 18 minutes to expose a system built on silence. It took one voice, one ear, to pull the curtain back. What happened at the UN wasn't just a crisis. It was a mirror held up to the world. From now on, words will still be translated, but not hidden, and the world will never hear Africa or any nation the same way again. 2 months after the shocking events at the United Nations, the world turned its eyes to a different kind of stage, a courtroom in New York City. The case of the people versus Elena Michaels had officially begun. The courtroom was packed. Journalists from around the world, lined up outside. What was on trial wasn't just a translator. It was the integrity of international diplomacy itself. The case quickly became known as the Michaels case, and it would soon be cited in law schools and diplomatic circles for years to come. Captain Ibrahim Traoré took the stand as a key witness. Calm, composed, and unwavering, he spoke directly to the heart of the matter. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a deliberate attempt to silence the voices of smaller nations. This manipulation kept us in the shadows. Michaels' legal team tried to spin the story differently. They claimed she had merely softened the language for diplomatic courtesy, not to deceive, but to avoid offense. But the evidence said otherwise. On the third week of the trial, Dr. Robertson, a leading voice analysis expert, submitted a bombshell report. His analysis revealed a 78% semantic deviation between what Traoré said and what Michaels had translated. That number is far beyond human error, Dr. Chin testified. This wasn't lost in translation. It was taken. The courtroom fell silent. The prosecutor didn't mince words. This is professional sabotage, not just one speech, but the principle of honest diplomacy. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty. The judge issued a sentence of 18 months professional suspension and a $50,000 fine for ethical misconduct and deliberate misrepresentation at an international institution. Outside the courthouse, Traoré addressed the press. Justice has been done, not just for me, but for every nation that was silenced. This is a victory for truth and transparency. A new era begins by the 6th month. Something extraordinary began to take shape. The UN had rolled out its new translation system, rebuilt from the ground up with 3 key pillars: quality control, live verification, and public transparency. The first major test came when Traoré returned to the podium for a new address. This time, every word spoken in French was flawlessly mirrored in English, Arabic, Spanish, Mandarin, and Russian. No distortions. No hidden edits. No diplomatic adjustments. As he ended his speech, the chamber stood and applauded, not just for the man, but for the moment. 6 months ago, a lie echoed in this hall. Traoré said, "Today, the truth stands stronger than ever. No more nation will be mistranslated into silence." Legacy of a scandal on the first anniversary of the event. The reforms were nearly complete. The UN's translation protocols were now seen as the gold standard, a model that other international bodies like the World Bank, IMF, and even the ICC began adopting. Academic institutions took notice too. At Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, a new course was introduced: the Traoré case, language, power, and global accountability. As for Elena Michaels, after serving her sentence, she was barred from working with any international agency. The lobbying firm she had worked with faced harsh sanctions for their role in promoting global disinformation. But this wasn't just about one woman or one system. 2 years later, a standing ovation for truth on the 2nd anniversary, Traoré returned to the UN once more. This time, not as a whistleblower, but as a symbol of global reform. What we learned from that crisis, he said, pausing to scan the faces before him, is that democracy isn't just about elections. It's about representation. It's about truth. And it must be defended every day. The delegates rose to their feet, a 15-minute standing ovation. It wasn't just applause. It was recognition of a leader who refused to let his people be spoken for. The new gold standard today, the UN's translation system, is more than functional. It's trusted. Each speech is translated and recorded in real time. Every interpreter is independently vetted and audited. Every country, no matter how small, now speaks and is heard. The moment that started with one man refusing to be misquoted has rippled across continents. International bodies from the African Union to the European Parliament have cited the incident as a reason to double down on transparency. Even the tech world responded. Social platforms like YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, and Meta implemented new policies on how translations and captions are handled in global content. Google Translate, once just a tool, now includes international oversight committees to ensure fairness and accuracy across languages. The The speech that moved diplomacy forward by 18 years in the end. It took only 18 minutes for Captain Ibrahim Traoré to expose the truth. But that truth, raw and unfiltered, pushed the world forward by decades. "We didn't ask to speak louder," he said. "We asked not to be silenced." And the world listened. The moment Captain Ibrahim Traoré interrupted his speech at the UN to expose a hidden betrayal didn't just send ripples through diplomacy. It triggered a global wave. Within minutes, clips of that moment flooded the internet. Hashtags like hashtag #UnTranslationScandal and hashtag AfricaSpeaks were trending in dozens of countries. The now iconic video, where Traoré quietly but firmly declared, "I say peace, she translates war," reached 50 million views on YouTube within 24 hours. But the internet wasn't just watching, it was rising. In cities across the globe, London, Paris, New York, African diaspora communities took to the streets. They gathered in front of UN buildings, waving flags, holding handmade signs, and chanting in unison, "You cannot distort Africa's voice." It wasn't just a protest. It was a demand for respect for truth and for justice. Political shockwaves reached far beyond social media. In France, an emergency session of parliament was called. Lawmakers stood one after another to declare that mistranslation was not a diplomatic issue. It was a democratic threat. In the UK, MPs raised concerns about translation bias and manipulation in global institutions. Both countries vowed to support international reforms. Meanwhile, universities acted just as fast. Columbia University held a symposium on translation ethics and the future of international diplomacy. Harvard hosted a panel on media distortion and democratic erosion. Scholars call the incident a watershed moment in global trust. The human side of the scandal, as the world dug into the systems behind the scandal, the human toll came into focus. Elena Michaels, once a respected interpreter with 2 decades of experience, became the face of the controversy. Canadian by nationality, she had studied at McGill University and worked at the UN for 15 years. Her professional history was spotless until now. Her colleagues were stunned. Some defended her character. Others admitted they had noticed odd patterns in recent months. But no one was more affected than her family. Her husband and 2 children, caught in a storm of press and public backlash, were forced to leave their home in Montreal temporarily. The media coverage became so intense that police had to provide security outside their residence. The tech reckoning beyond the courtroom and protests. The tech world had its own moment of reckoning. Major companies, Google, Apple, Microsoft, announced new initiatives to prevent manipulation in AI-powered translation systems. Engineers proposed something radical, using blockchain technology to create permanent, unchangeable records of live translations. If a speech was distorted, the record would show exactly how. Meanwhile, the UN itself upgraded its entire tech infrastructure. Translation booths were fitted with high-resolution security cameras. All interpreter communications were now logged. An encrypted real-time verification system was implemented, flagging high-risk discrepancies during live speeches. What began as a human scandal was now sparking a technological evolution. The weight of that moment, when asked later about what went through his mind that day, Captain Traoré responded softly, "I felt I wasn't just representing Burkina Faso. I was carrying the voice of all Africa. I couldn't let it be twisted again." That sense of responsibility to history, to his people, to the truth, became the reason he chose to speak up, and others followed. Inspired by Traoré's courage, African leaders began taking more assertive roles in UN sessions. Delegates began listening more carefully, questioning translations, and demanding accuracy. What once was taken for granted, the simple act of being correctly understood, had now become a cornerstone of modern diplomacy, a new legal frontier from a legal standpoint. The event was groundbreaking. The International Court of Justice began drafting new protocols for translation ethics in diplomacy. A new legal category was introduced: intentional translation distortion in international communication. What Traoré had triggered was more than a scandal. It was a shift in the very foundation of how nations communicate and trust each other. The lesson for the future years from now: when students read about the event, they won't just read about a mistranslation. They'll read about a moment when silence was broken, When one voice became a continent's voice, when one pause mid-sentence rewrote the rules of international engagement. And they'll remember the words that followed. You can't distort Africa's voice. Because from that day forward, no one dared to try.